The smoker is a beekeeper's best friend. This simple device is what beekeepers use to minimize the stings that they receive from bees. So how does it work? Well, it works functionally by masking the alarm pheromones of honeybees. When honeybees become defensive while you're working their nest, they start producing a pheromone that causes other bees to be defensive. Those bees start producing a pheromone that causes other bees to be defensive, and before you know it, you've got a lot of defensive bees. So the smoke, when used appropriately, will mask the alarm pheromone of the colony and allow you to work the colony with calmer bees. Now, I want to stress that some colonies can be defensive through the smoke, but most colonies are very controllable with a proper use of a smoker. So I'm going to describe briefly here what the parts of a smoker are. I'm going to show you how to light one, and then I'm going to talk a bit about smoker maintenance to ensure that your smoker lasts well into your beekeeping future. So the simple smoker is really subdivided into about 5 main parts. There's the nozzle that directs the smoke. There's the fuel chamber. There's the bellow that pushes the smoke through the fuel chamber and out the nozzle. There's the guard around the fuel chamber. And as you see when we go inside, there's also a fuel platform in this smoker. So the way it works is when you push the bellow, it forces the air that it collected in the bellow down through an opening at the bottom of the smoker and then out the nozzle of the smoker. When you release the bellow pulls air back into it through a hole in the middle of the bellow. So in through the middle of the bellow, out through the bottom of the bellow, and it directs that smoke out of the smoker. The guard is largely in place to keep you from touching the fuel chamber, which can get so hot that if you use your smoker at nighttime, it will glow. A lot of smokers have these little rings on top to give you a finger handle. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a fuel stand inside of this smoker that, when placed appropriately at the bottom of the smoker, keeps the fuel off the base of the smoker and therefore away from the hole that has to have air forced through it. If you take out this stand and simply fill the fuel chamber with fuel, it's going to clog that hole and keep the air from flowing kind of methodically through this smoker. So let's go put all of this together and show you how to light this smoker. There's not a lot of tools necessary in order to light a smoker properly. You really only need 4 things. You need a smoker, you need the fuel, you need a source of fire, and finally, I like to have my hive tool on hand. You'll see why shortly. Let's talk a little about smoker fuels. Here we're using pine straw because it's so common in the southeastern United States. It's a very common smoker fuel, likely because of its availability. It tends to be absolutely everywhere. It gets really dry. It makes a good strong smoke for a very long period of time. You can also purchase wood pellets from many of the beekeeping equipment supply companies. This is also a good smoker fuel. It can be a little bit more difficult to light, but there are some strategies that you can use to ensure a good smoke. But I've traveled around the world. People have used all sorts of things for smoker fuel, including paper, dried animal dung, grass clippings. I've seen leaves, pieces of wood, things such as that. I've really not seen a lot of research studies on the safety of the different smoker fuels, again, to beekeepers. It's one of those things that we are very careful with. We always try to choose a smoker fuel that's very natural and organic and dry. For example, we don't like to use paper here at the lab. We don't like to use things like burlap sacks because there can be residue chemicals in those particular smoker fuels. So keeping it simple. If you have questions about what you can use relatively safely in your area, you might reach out to commercial beekeepers who've been doing it a long time in your space so that you know what's available and something that you can have access to and that you won't have to worry too much about. So when starting a smoker, you really have to remember 2 basic things about fire. Fire needs fuel and fire needs oxygen. Almost everyone who lights smokers gets the fuel part correct, but they tend to overstuff the smoker with fuel, much to the detriment of the oxygen part of the fuel. So when I light a smoker, I try to make sure that I'm getting an ample amount of fuel, but likewise an ample amount of oxygen. So I will take a little bit of fuel, place it very loosely in the bottom of the smoker, and then I will grab roughly an equal amount of fuel, like what you see here, and light it. You have to be very careful with fire. Here you see me lighting the smoker on a concrete slab. That's highly recommended. If you're in the apiary, you might want to light it on a dirt patch in the apiary. Once you have fire coming out of the top of the smoker, you can take some more fuel. And I have not packed this fuel into the smoker yet. All I've done is lightly place it, and I make sure and give it some big, strong puffs while I'm putting that fuel in. At this point, I know I can add a little bit more fuel. Again, I've yet to pack that fuel into the fuel chamber. I just lightly place it in. I give the smoker really strong puffs. And when you see a nice rich bellow of smoke coming out of the smoker, you know it's safe to add, yet again, more fuel. Again, I have not packed this smoker tight. I'm simply placing fuel in the top of it, giving it lots of puffs just to make sure that fire is getting ample oxygen. And when you see this rich white smoke bellowing out of the top of the smoker, you know you're heading in the right direction. Now, if I were continuing to stuff this smoker with pine straw, I would repeat that process another 2 to 3 times. And once I get a really strong bellow of smoke coming out, I can take my hive tool and pack that fuel as tight as I want it to be. In this case, I would have added pine straw, but in the example that I'm going to use here is I wanted to show you that now that I've got it started with some basic pine straw, I can add wood pellets that have a slightly longer life than pine straw. At this point, I'll put the last wood pellet in, make sure that smoker is rolling, and then I replace the funnel or the nozzle through which the smoke is directed, and at that point, I've safely lit a smoker. One key thing to remind you while you are working with a smoker in the apiary, a lot of beginner beekeepers overpack their smoker with too much fuel. They choke out that smoke, and they start working their colony. They'll give it a light puff. They'll set their smoker on the ground, forget that they had a smoker that they overpacked, work that colony, and then when they finally need it, there's no smoke coming out. So I often will put that smoker close to my foot on the ground, and sometimes while I'm working bees, I'll use my foot to continue to push that smoker to ensure that it's getting ample oxygen. But just to show you, when you do a smoker properly, you get lots of robust smoke coming out to help you calm those bees. You've finished working your bees, your smoker's still going, what do you do with it? Well, let me give you a few pointers about this. If you're moving on to the next apiary, you can plug the nozzle of the smoker and you can safely transport it to the next place. A lot of beekeepers will plug the nozzle, turn the smoker on its side, which basically puts the smoker out naturally. They transport it safely in the back of their truck to the next apiary. But when you're completely done, you need to extinguish the fire in that smoker to ensure that it's not going to be a problem and start a fire somewhere. We have this metal trash can that's filled with water that we actually dump our smoker fuel into, and then that water will put out the fire. We like using a metal trash can because it's safer around fire. Also, a lot of beekeepers will simply dump the unused fuel onto a piece of concrete or cement pad or something like that. They'll stomp it out. It's a really good place to put out a fire from a smoker. But if you're in the apiary and you don't have that opportunity, just find a patch of dirt in the apiary, dump out your smoker fuel, step it out, and then cover it with dirt to ensure that that fuel is completely done, that there's no fire that you're going to be leaving in the apiary. Now, smokers are amazing, fantastic, and necessary tools in the beekeeping world, but they also get wear and tear. One of the first things that happens to smokers is the bellow will give out over time, just through repeated use, just through weather. So the good news is a lot of equipment manufacturers sell replacement bellows. They're really easy to change out on a smoker, something you can do with no problem. The other two things that typically happen with smokers is just through smoke use. This area of the smoker will be filled with scuzz and clog and tar and pitch created by the smoke, and likewise this area of the smoker through which the bellow pushes air will also become clogged. So it's good every few months of smoker use to open up the nozzle, the lid of this smoker, clean out this area, ensure that this part here of the smoker is also open to allow airflow. With the smoker put out, with the smoker properly taken care of, we tend to keep our smokers in a metal cabinet that's dry, it's outside, it reduces or eliminates the risk that we're going to start a fire in or at the building. If you take care of your smoker and use it properly, you'll ensure its longevity, but you'll also be able to have countless hours of enjoyment working bees that are very docile because you are using the smoke correctly to keep them calm.